comment section, give me a thumbs up. I forgot the background noise, but I'm in Turkish Airlines lounge at the moment. And unfortunately, I don't have any microphones with me. I don't have a laptop with me. Anyway, I'm stuck at the airport now for the next few hours, the consequence of a flight delay. So I figured, since I have a little bit of spare time and it's Sunday and most of my people aren't working and I can't really do much, I figured I'd just do an AMA, talk to you guys. So thank you all for coming, and I'd love to get your questions. And while we're waiting for those questions to percolate, we'll talk a little bit about what happened in Africa, the great things that... there we go. Sorry guys, I'm on airport Wi-Fi, and occasionally it's not the most reliable. So we graduated the class, and it was a great class. We had quite a bit of fun. Phil Wadler was there. We danced, we laughed, we cried, and it was really just an amazing experience to see how much they learned in such a short period of time. It actually had quite a functional component as well, because the gals were actually working with Plutus for the last month of the course. And so the Plutus section of the class was the first time an external party had an opportunity to actually use our software. And as a consequence, we were able to discover lots of usability issues and some things we could do to improve the developer workflow. So we're a much better company, and we're certainly a much better product for the IWHK Summit. So if you guys come to the Summit April 17th to 18th, the Plutus team will be there, and you'll see a new and improved Plutus playground, and you'll see a lot of good, fun Plutus examples. We're probably going to have the Ugandan gals, along with a few of the Ethiopians, come on board and have them work for the next few months, continuing to QA and beta test Plutus and build various things and break things so that the product can ultimately improve. But wheels are turning. We met with the World Food Organization, or the World Food Program, excuse me. We met with ATA, the Agricultural Transformation Agency, the CEO, Khalid. We met with USC and a variety of other parties, and we had lots of great discussions about everything from importation of fertilizer and seeds to inventory control systems for warehouses that don't suffer from as much skimming and adulteration, to problems in the aquaculture industry, as well as issues with the coffee business in Ethiopia. There's actually more than 10 major commodities grown in Ethiopia. The principal crop is called teff, which goes into injera, which is a kind of a bread. It's kind of a super bread. It has all these nice minerals and vitamins, and people really do enjoy it there. And actually, it's illegal at the moment to export teff from Ethiopia. So there's a lot of politics, and there's a lot of regulations that need to be navigated. And now begins phase 2 of our plan to roll across all of Ethiopia and gradually do pilots and learn from them. So anyway, I've talked enough. This is your AMA, so let's see what questions you guys have for me. So let me click on the chat right here, and we'll go to live chat. There we go. Okay. With the successful completion of this course in Ethiopia, are there plans to follow up with a cohort and track their journey in some manner and provide technical assistance should they need it? This is an unusual class in that we're probably going to end up hiring the vast majority or all of the class members. So we're going to make a job, we're going to give them an opportunity to apply to IWHK, and our intention is to hire all 23 if we can. Now, in terms of the labor divisions, most of them will go into some sort of technical role, although some of them are a bit more entrepreneurial and have a strong desire to go into something in the business side of the organization. So we flew out our HR director, Tamara Hassan, and actually we did a very long Cardinal Effect episode. It's over 3 hours long, and it should be coming out sometime next week on various things we're doing in Africa. So there's probably a 20 or 30 minute chunk of that 3-hour podcast coming out next week, which will discuss these students in particular. And so I won't retread that territory, other than to say that not only are we going to track their progress, they're probably going to end up as IOHK employees or contractors, so they'll be actually working on core products at some point, including Cardinal and derivative products like dApps written with Plutus. Now, in terms of replication of the cohort, we've already been in discussions with Crypto Savannah to take the 4 Ugandan students and turn them into TAs for a Uganda class, so that we can actually upgrade them to a point where they would be able to teach courses autonomously, so without us. So we have a pretty comprehensive plan. Part of it is with Ice Addis, and part of it's with Crypto Savannah. And the upcoming episode of the Cardinal effect will go into great detail, well over an hour, to discuss that. So let's see what else we got. Greetings from Spain. Actually working for a multinational company. We are testing Hyperledger, how Cardano will deal with this private blockchain. Thank you for your dedication. Well, Jamie, we do have an enterprise blockchain product we're building. We will announce that product most likely at the summit, but you'll just have to wait and see. We'll have a big discussion there about our enterprise strategy. That said, I don't see them as mutually exclusive. I see them as quite complementary. And come to the summit, we can have a lovely conversation about these things. When will the entire roadmap be ready? That's going to be ready for the IOHK Summit. So we'll announce the new roadmap then. Will ADA be the only currency in the ecosystem, or will more be introduced at some point? It wouldn't be a particularly useful financial operating system if you couldn't issue your own assets in it. Cardano is a multi-ledger system, so it will support multi-currencies, and we think we have a great strategy for handling that. I've partnered with somebody personally who's in the STO market to see what we could do about bringing STOs to our platform as well, or at least ensure interoperability with those standards. So we will be a multi-asset ledger. Will you release the training material from the course? So we're going to have a summit with Jamie, Lars, and Lena. There we go. We're going to have a summit with Jamie, Lars, and Polina, specifically about the material that was covered in the course. That will likely be done in Munich, and so the Munich summit will result in a scaffolding for the entire class. We'll take that scaffolding and then we'll put it into likely 4 or 5 discrete packages, kind of like what TypeSafe did with the Scala course on Coursera. And then we'll go shopping to see the best platform to roll that course out. So that will take a bit of time to develop, but we did hire dedicated resources to take what we've done now in 3 cohorts and transport that into a full class to discuss functional programming, Haskell in particular, and then advanced techniques like dependent types and proof check and these types of things. So that will be eventually ported to some sort of MOOC format. And then it's an open question of what platform would be the best deployed. I really like what TypeSafe has done with Coursera for the Scala class, and so it would be really nice to partner with Coursera. So we'll see what options we have and what that looks like. We could either do that under the IOHK brand, or I think we might be able to do that with one of our university partners who has a university relationship with Coursera. If not them, edX is always available, or we might even be able to negotiate something with Udacity. The worst case scenario would be us releasing a series of courses on Udemy, which I have some personal experience with. So these things take time, but the pedagogy translation is already underway. And given that we've taken it through 3 cohorts, we've learned a huge amount about how to teach Haskell to people. Chico Crypto is absolutely crazy for you. You should give him a chance and accept his invitation for an interview. Nope. Hi Charles, are you a libertarian? And if yes, why? The answer is mostly. Over time, I've gained a slight appreciation for the tragedy of the commons and collective problems and externalities. So I do believe that there are times when you need to reconfigure markets so that they pay attention to the long term rather than the short term. In some cases, markets just simply don't do that, or they do that only after a lot of pushing and failures that really hurt people. The whole core thesis of libertarianism is basically do no harm. It's let people live to their own devices, let people do their own things, and as long as they're not harming other people, they should be free. So let them love who they want, let them live where they want, let them think what they want, let them believe what they want. It's a very basic principle, and I don't fear other people's ideas or lifestyles. I do see that certain behavior can be quite harmful to society, and certain behavior can be quite harmful to particular people. And that's where you need to think about governance carefully. But for the most part, I lean very libertarian and have supported many libertarian candidates in the past. Do you plan to do an interview with Ivan on tech? I don't know if he's invited me on or not. If he does, I'd be happy to talk to him. As for preaching EOS, at the end of the day, if he likes centralization, then that's a perfectly legitimate product. I really don't see the product differentiation of deploying something on EOS versus deploying something on Amazon, except for it being much more expensive, unpredictable pricing, and lower quality of service. And also, when things go wrong, you have no recovery mode outside of begging a committee of people to save you. The reality is that if you take 1980s technology and you apply it to blockchain, you can certainly do that. Fabric did that, and other people have done that, and you can get reasonably decent performance in the 3,000 to 5,000 TPS range. This is not innovation. This is just application of old concepts, and then bolting on poorly conceived governance system, and then cutting a lot of core facilities, for example, like validating transactions or Byzantine resistance for performance, again, really doesn't achieve anything other than being a vanity project for the sake of trying to capture some market share and mislead people. You can look no further than their conduct as a fundraiser to get an understanding of who they are as a project. Hello, I wanted to ask if Cardinal fulfilled the POS term for this end of the month. It is 7 days for the period that was promised. Testnet is coming soon, guys. If not this month, very, very shortly thereafter. People have been working ridiculously hard to get us to a point where we feel comfortable launching a system. The Rust testnet is mostly on schedule. There's a lot of QA that has to be done to get it stable. This is incredibly new stuff. The fact that we're where we're at shows that we've made massive improvements in our engineering processes, as well as our ability to reasonably estimate when things are going to ship. I'm actually quite happy with what our engineers are doing, and I'm quite happy with the state of the software as it is. It's a long road because we need third parties to work with us. We need people to run stake pools. We need people to basically tell us how to improve the user interface. We need people to start running smart contracts. This is a living system, and there's a part of the system I build and part of the system you build. It's always been that way. And we can release things today or tomorrow, but if the community doesn't show up or is not participating at a necessary level, at the end of the day, it's like having a conversation with yourself. Not so interesting. So we're mostly on schedule. Things are looking pretty good. The summit's going to be very nice. Rust testnet is close to release. Ledger is coming soon, likely before the end of this month. And we're really excited to see these things actually become reality. The vision's definitely crystallizing, and we're quite happy with the way things have gone from an abstraction and aspirations to reality. And there's an enormous amount of very good code that's being used by a lot of different actors, from Ada Light to Yoroi to Infinito Wallet and other actors. That really is a testimony to how things have improved, even in just the last 6 months. Is anyone transferring value with Cardinal? Yes. Tens and if not hundreds of millions of dollars. Why did you engage with people like Tone Vays in the last interview? Was utterly pointless. He didn't look at you at all interested. You see, the thing about Tone is I've known Tone for years. We've interviewed and talked in Ukraine. We've interviewed and talked in New York. I've gone on a show multiple times, and he's multiple occasions said that everything I do is a scam and Bitcoin is the most perfect thing in the entire world. At the end of the day, you have to be willing to talk to people who disagree with you, as long as they're not disagreeable. While Tone Vays strongly disagrees with things I do, the projects I work on, and in some cases says the projects I work on, violate the law, like securities law or something like that. Tone has never been dishonest. He's just sharing his opinion. He's not stating things that aren't factually true. He's just saying, well, these are events, and here's my opinion about these events. You have to be willing to engage with people that have differences of opinion about how the world works, how your industry works, and that's how you win hearts and minds. If all I speak to is my own audience, then we'll just get a bunch of people who already agree with me, and the movement will never get bigger. You have to talk to people who aren't swayed, neutral people, or people who don't even like you. And then over time, if you're legitimate, real, and your arguments have merit, slowly but surely you win people over. Now, this is in stark contrast to propagandists and to people that have no interest at all in factual conversations or no interest at all in a debate. A great example of that would be the Chico crypto issues, where basically he's just taken slander, gossip, and other things that have no bearing in reality and stitch them together into a narrative that he hopes can inflame my community and myself into provoking a fight, so then I can go on a show and he can get more ratings and talk about it for the next 6 weeks to 8 weeks, do a bunch of episodes, and every one of them gets lots of views. That translates to money for him. It has nothing to do with facts. It has nothing to do with getting to the truth of the matter. It's just a patently absurd and insane claims. For example, we ran a shady ICO in Japan. Just think logically through that. Think very logically through that. By doing KYC and AML on everyone, by putting a recovery system in, by having a voucher system that gave us assurances that people actually received what they bought, by having a help desk for people to complain to and going on help desk tours, paying for that out of pocket for 3 years. And the only reason we didn't get sued is because crypto blew up. So all the work we've done, all the papers we've written, the more than 40 research papers we've written don't matter and they mean nothing. Just think it through. Think really through what he's saying there. And then it was a shady ICO. In what way? High pressure sales tactics. If you buy something, but you have to go through KYC and AML, and that takes days to weeks before you can complete the purchase, and you can change your mind at any time, and no cash has changed hands yet, how is that high pressure? You can go home and talk to your friends and family. You can go to work for a whole week and think about it. It's just unbelievable. And actually, this is one of the few that actually had demographic information, including age, location, distribution, which meant that there were actual provable participants, unlike certain other ICOs where the founders could have created fake people and cycled money through their ICO just to give themselves more tokens. And you have no idea if the entire ownership is owned by one person or not because of the anonymity of the offering. So, things were done. Very large event. We consulted but didn't run it. But according to him, there's no difference between me and everyone else. And we're just shady, horrible people. The work we've done means nothing. The code we've written means nothing. The science we've done means nothing. The market success we've had means nothing. The exchange access we have means nothing. The massive 100,000 plus community we have means nothing. Daedalus means nothing. Yoroi means nothing. The Tangem partnership means nothing. work on Plutus means nothing. The fact that we brought some of the pioneers in the functional programming world, made them care and think about our space and write great research and create great languages like Plutus and Marlowe, that means nothing. The BTL, Blockchain Technology Lab in University of Edinburgh, means nothing. The graduate students we paid to get their PhDs, some of which have already finished them, mean nothing. The postdocs we've sponsored mean nothing. The people we've trained in Ethiopia and changed their lives, and Barbados and Athens, that means nothing. It's all a scam, according to this guy, because Dan Larimer doesn't like me, and Vitalik doesn't like me, or said something about me on Reddit. I mean, at some point, you have to have some goddamn empathy and humanity. And there is just absolutely none. He's bereft of it. So why validate and reward people who do that? Just so that you guys can grab some popcorn and watch? All the while, the more who do it, the more money he makes. No. That's not who I am, that's not what we're about, and that's not what we reward. So he can just go suck a cock and have some fun. Hi, Charles. Cardinal's core development team looks really strong. However, it appears that developer ecosystem has a long way to go. Actually, I disagree with that. Here's why. If you're a functional programmer, if you're somebody who writes functional programming code, so like Haskell or OCaml or Lisp, there's really nothing for you at the moment in the cryptocurrency space. There's no canonical chain where you can go and do something. There's some boutique micro things going on like Zen Protocol, and Tezos lets you write a few things in Michelson, but nobody's really thought out, how do I write full stack applications? So things that run on the client side, things that run on the server, but things that then also run on the blockchain. With one code stack where I can verify everything through and through, and also a really sensible model about how you scale that, and a really sensible model about how the components communicate with each other. So for the most part, functional programmers tend to ignore our space, or they're aware of it, but they don't really care too much about it. So when you create a really compelling, great option that the programming community understands and likes, then suddenly you have access to tens of thousands of developers who are currently sitting on the sidelines. And they're a very special class of developers. There are those who probably are much more experienced than your JavaScript or Java equivalents. This is not a dig on the JavaScript people, it's just when you learn imperative languages and object-oriented languages, generally that's where you start when you become a programmer. And you only learn functional programming either later in your academic career, or on the job, or as a kind of a side passion. So what we find demographically is that functional programmers tend to be a bit older. They tend to be in their 30s or 40s. We also tend to see that they have several years, like 5-10 years of experience writing software. So if you're saying, boy, what demographic do I want to have when I launch my platform? Do I want to have a bunch of script kiddies that write poor code and they probably don't have a lot of life experience and capital to work with or credibility, and just let them go and chip away at things and see what they can do? If you're talking about scripting web pages, maybe PHP and JavaScript's great, and that's how the internet got started. But you're actually talking about professional applications involving your medical software, or you're talking about your privacy or your money in your wallet. You probably want very serious skilled engineers that are involved there. And so by picking a heavy-duty language, that bootstraps a very good ecosystem. And we have people who've been in that ecosystem for 30, 40 years, in some cases created the foundations of large chunks of that ecosystem, or worked with people who did that. For example, Philip Wadler is currently sitting in Robin Milner's chair at University of Edinburgh. And Milner was a Turing Award winner, inventor of process calculus. So I think that going niche is actually very important to bootstrap an ecosystem the right way. And then what you do is, after you get to a certain critical threshold, you open the ecosystem up a little bit more. That's how Facebook grew, that's how the iPhone grew, I think it's just a great growth model when you're talking about a fundamentally new paradigm that consumers aren't pre-trained on. And then it's just a game of how quickly do you open that, and what ways do you open that are still useful and preserve where things are going. That said, we do have a developer strategy. We're able to train increasingly larger sets of people, and when the MOOCs come out and we can start doing classes in parallel, it's going to be easy for us to train hundreds and eventually thousands of developers every year. And we can train them in jurisdictions and areas where there's access to capital, good deal flow, and a strong desire to actually solve big problems that are intersectional with IoT and AI and open hardware, and to solve problems in the agricultural business, to solve problems with traffic flow, air quality issues, and so forth. Many, many things across the economy, and even foundational government services like property and business registration. Getting people to enter into that space is one way of getting adoption. The MOOC is another way of getting adoption. And then just getting people who've been waiting on the sidelines is another way of getting adoption. And to bring these things together, I think that you'll get well more than enough developers to start in the ecosystem, probably too many. And then at some point you can easily open it up, and we have strategies for that. That was what the K project was all about. But frankly, there's many different routes to ensure interoperability with legacy languages like Java, JavaScript, and so forth. Hey Charles, are you chilling with Craig Wright at the airport? It's kind of a funny thing. I saw him walk by, and I did a double take, and I said, yeah, I don't know about that. That looks like Craig Wright. And I was thinking about it, and I said, God, it just looks so close to him. I don't know him too well, and I've only seen him a few times in person, but he has a very distinctive walk and scowl that permanently has on his face. And then when I noticed him yelling at somebody and not being nice and having wine at like 11 o'clock in the morning, I said, that's probably him. So not 100% sure because we didn't chat, but I did take a picture. And, we can crowdsource if it's really Craig Wright or not. So I call it, caught a fake-a-chew. Wonder where he's going. Any news on the stake pools and the manner in which the decentralization process will occur? So that's underway. We just shipped 1.5. Hard fork will begin probably in the next month. We'll coordinate that with the exchanges, but we need to make sure a lot of people upgrade first. And there's a fairly high upgrade rate there. I'll get the numbers next week. But the Shelley testnet is almost out. And that's basically going to start stake pool saturation. The wallet backend has been mostly decoupled. They're following an extreme programming model. Matthias Bencourt is the head of that work stream, and they're getting releases like weekly or bi-weekly. And they're moving very quickly towards integrating the Haskell wallet backend code with the Rust code. And then Eric DeCastro is right now working on taking the new Haskell code and connecting that code, the two distinct pieces of that code, so the network code and the consensus code, and connecting that to the chain code, ledger rules. And once that connection is done, we can begin connecting those two modules to the wallet backend. So then we can actually have the wallet backend connecting to two distinct cores, one in Rust and one in Haskell. So that's actually happening pretty quickly. So as the testnet is released, you'll see rapid iterations, perhaps even weekly, where we just keep adding and adding code that's on the sidelines that we're rolling out. And at the same time, stake saturation will be occurring. And then what will occur is we'll connect the Rust code to the Haskell wallet backend and to Daedalus, and that will be a fully functioning unit. So end to end, that's functionally what we imagine Shelley to look like. As we get closer to that, we will begin a pretty comprehensive security audit of all the new code that's written, likely with Kadelsky as the auditor. And as soon as that's remediated, then we'll be in a good position to actually roll out the full Shelley stack. So that will be post 1.5 hard fork. And the stake pools who are registered on the Rust side can easily roll over, re-register quickly on the new code base. It'll be roughly the same user experience, and there'll be no surprises there. And then just the march to decentralization begins. So I think it's a pretty reasonable launch strategy. When you do a proof-of-stake cryptocurrency, you have to wait for the market cap and for the distribution to get a little spread. Because what you don't want to happen is that most of the money just stays on the sidelines, people buy it at a very low rate, and then the system launches and basically you have this plutocracy. You'd rather have trading, you'd rather have natural markets occurring and the Gini coefficient proving a bit. Then you'd also want to have some degree of network stability occurring, and then you gradually decentralize from there. As kind of a thought experiment, imagine launching a proof-of-work cryptocurrency today with a high price but low hash rate. That would create kind of a problem. And a lot of people would rush on in, and you'd have a very high probability that somebody, if you're sharing this algorithm with an external system, would come in and perform a 51% attack. And this actually happened with a lot of recent proof-of-work cryptocurrencies. So it's important that when you launch these systems, they have training wheels on them, and the social dynamics, the network dynamics, and the market dynamics all settle. And I think a year is enough time, and now we're in a position where it's gradually rolling out. Shelley's decentralizing, and it just happens that the code is at a pretty mature state to do that as well. So it's quite fortuitous that both of these events are occurring. Thank you, Charles, for your work. Does Cardinal plan to sell merchandise like shirts, etc.? I don't sell merchandise, but there's a great store you can go to called Crypto Supreme. It's run by one of our associates, and he stocks a lot of great things like T-shirts and occasionally specialty items like paper wallets and coins. And Crypto Supreme is pretty reliable. They have never heard of a customer complaint or issue that didn't get resolved. Highly recommend them. Good guys. Charles, do a lot of Cardano fans notice you in public? Yes, and non-Cardano fans notice me in public. It's a pretty surreal experience to walk through an airport or with passport control or at a restaurant and be noticed. And all of these things have happened, and they've happened in more than 30 countries. So that's just the way it is, and not a really pleasant experience most of the time. Sometimes it's fun, though. Hoskinson, do you want to auction your jacket? No, I'm going to be buried with it. He should come to South Africa and play with lion balls if he's tough. I'm not South Africa tough. I can't play with lion balls. They can. Hello, Mr. Charles. How was it meeting Justin Sun, and did you two discuss working in the near future? So there was a venture capitalist who's quite wealthy who invited me to a private event named Mr. Chen in Hong Kong, and he also invited Justin Sun and Vitalik. Vitalik happened to be in town on the same day, so I showed up, Justin showed up, a lot of prominent people throughout Hong Kong and China showed up. Vitalik was a no-show. Oh well. But I did have an opportunity to talk to Justin, and we went to another event after the dinner. Very nice guy. He was very polite and very smart. And we had a good conversation, mostly about the macroeconomics of the space, nothing technical or nothing about partnership. But he's probably one of the best marketers in the space. Some days you always wonder. Anyway, I have nothing negative to say about the meeting. He was very cordial and friendly. Charles, our company started a blockchain task force. What's the best way for us to get into Plutus and Marlowe? We will have custom material, but if you want to do a large-scale training, then go ahead and reach out to us. You can go to our website. We have a contact page, and we'll be happy to talk to you. And if it's a big thing, we might be able to help you design a training course. There's also Emergo. They're planning a training academy for Cardano, and that's going to be in India for 3,500 people. They may be able to take some of that curriculum and port it over for your company. We don't directly do corporate training, but we'd be happy to share PowerPoint presentations, lectures, and I think they did record some of the lectures, if not all of the lectures, in Ethiopia, so they may be useful for you guys. We do everything under a Creative Commons attribution license, but it is commercial, so you're free to take our work and commercialize it. You just have to cite where you got it from. So we'd be happy to share PowerPoints, YouTube videos, and other things with you guys. Just go to our website and send us an email, and we'll see what you guys have, and we might be able to help you out. As someone who travels more than most, what's your one thing you can't leave behind? Make it interesting. I have a laptop bag I carry with me, and it has my computing devices in it. I run my whole company from my devices, so it would be pretty hard to leave that behind. As for interesting things, I always have my boots on, in some way or another. And you never put those in your carry-on, in your check-in bag, because I have a habit of having my luggage lost. It happens about once or twice a year. Yeah, I guess it's just the probability of things, and the nature of the places I go to. Usually they get me my luggage to the hotel within a day or two of losing it, but in the case when I went to Ukraine, the bag was just totally lost, and every single thing in it is gone. So if you have anything you really treasure, probably don't travel with it unless it's right on your person, and even then stuff gets stolen. So I try to travel light and try to travel with things that are replaceable. The only things that aren't really replaceable is my coat and my boots. They're all custom made. I love these questions. Charles, will Cardano have something like dividends at some point in the future? Who would pay them? Where would you get the dividends from? Like, what profit would you get? This is not a security, people. There are no dividends in Cardano. Have you ever had media training? No. They would tell me not to do anything that I do. Charles, Italy, in buon tempo. Charles, have there ever been any consideration using the MaidSafe network to run Cardano, since that network is also coded in Rust? Well, I know David Irving, and I've been in the space long enough to remember that when MaidSafe did their crowd sale, and they actually had, I think, 7 years of history prior to doing the crowd sale, working on the problem, and that was 5 years ago. So I think they're up to 12 years now as a project. I think that the fundamental issue with MaidSafe is that they need better product and project management, and they also need perhaps more scientific realism in the things that they're doing. It's not to say that the things they're thinking about are unreasonable or that the people on the team are unreasonable. It's just that when you spend 12 years doing something and you haven't really succeeded, you have to take a step back and reevaluate your approach and say, is this truly the right one? For example, with Cardano, we took some missteps in the early days of the implementation and realized that the solution was to abandon those APIs and abandon those approaches, pivot, and change the way we were doing things. And we did this within about 8 months of being into the project. And now the fruits of that pivot are soon to hit market, and we're already seeing considerable improvements, from restoration time under 10 minutes to things like much higher quality code that's considerably easier to test, to faster release cycles, to easier times modularizing the software and connecting it to unrelated code bases, which is a hallmark of decoupling. I think all software projects have to understand that. And if you're at something, the same thing for a decade with the same approach, and you're not really seeing it flourish, you really do need to take a step back and say maybe that wasn't the right way to do it. And by the way, this is really good Turkish tea. If you ever go through Istanbul, they have lovely tea. Don't know anything about Skycoin. Charles, I've noticed a focus in Africa for the Haskell training. Are there any plans of investing in training in developing Southeast Asian countries? We may do something in Vietnam. We've also been considering doing a training course in Mongolia. So those are subject to discussions with the Mongolian government and academic partners, and the same in Vietnam. So we'll announce it when we make the next course decision. That probably will be in Africa, but maybe Asia. We'll see. Charles, what do you see your life like after Cardinal, retiring into foreign politics? I haven't given too much thought to retirement, but I would like to go back into mathematics in some capacity. Charles, any progress on liquid democracy? So we are working on Voltaire, and Bin Cheng is getting more people under him. We've moved from the theoretical to a plan that we think is going to get us where we need to go. We won't announce it today, but we will announce it either at the summit or the second half of 2019 for how we're going to roll out a treasury, and also put in a system to ensure proper social dynamics so that the treasury is intrinsically useful, and that we also have a mechanism of voting on forks in the system. So we're almost done with the Cardinal improvement proposal process. We brought on a new product manager, David Esser, and I had a process, but I wanted to defer to him until he got fully up to speed, whether to go with that process or to pivot. So after he gets his feet fully dried off, we'll go ahead and declare something, and post Shelley, we'll start using that process for upgrades to the system. Then basically voting in stage one for the forking of the system will compose of getting democratic consensus behind SIPs. And this is closely tied to participation behind the treasury system as a way of bringing people into the system. So treasury first, get the social dynamics right, then optional voting on SIPs, and then hopefully at some point, as formal methods progress, we can find a way to make SIPs compulsory, because SIPs can be formal specifications that are machine understandable with extractable reference code. And then you would actually be able to introduce the notion of a certified client. So you could create some sort of proof that either gives you certainty or some degree of certainty that your client is in line with the specifications of the system. And you can even make communication compulsory. So you actually have to include a proof to connect to a node that that node actually follows the client. So certified software is a big field. Formal methods is a big field. This is a very difficult thing to do, and that's something that's probably well out of scope for 2020, but it's something that could 2025, 2030, 2035 gradually work its way into the Cardinal network, especially as people start building on top of certified modules. So what that effectively means is, in the distant future, basically when people vote to change the system, that will have teeth, and whatever that reference implementation happens to be becomes basically the standard that people have to follow if they're actually wanting to participate in the system. And that would actually be enforced through decentralized mechanics and mathematics. So three-stage process: get the treasury right, get the social dynamics right, and then get a SIP system that is basically optional. So basically, people can vote on it, get democratic consensus, but it's not enforced by the network. And then the distant far future, for a much later sprint and the next big project, find a way to make that compulsory, and then you kind of have a completely autonomous end-to-end system. Yes, POS is mathematically possible. We proved that. And I believe that Ethereum definitely can pull POS together. They're welcome to use Ouroboros at any time. All right, let's get one more interesting question. What do you think about the Endor project? Endor is a predictive analytics project. It's run by people who are students of Alex Pentland, great connections to MIT, good clients, good market dynamics, and I think they have a wonderful product. And that's why I was very proud to join as an advisor, and we'll be working closely with them to find ways to help Endor grow as a product and hopefully become a standard for the industry, a decentralized way to use predictive analytics on data sets, but still preserve privacy of the underlying data set. Tremendously useful from everything from medical research to hedge fund strategies. And I'm very glad to see people thinking about how do we create an open market for this and allow many actors to join, share their data in a way they can monetize, but yet still preserve the privacy of the underlying data set. So good to be there. I'm looking for one more. Gareth Hayes. He asks, when moon? Well, Gareth, you've asked me that question a lot. Join these chats, say when moon. I always say the same thing. You need to go home and take a shower, Gareth. Actually, Gareth is a good friend of mine. He's the CTO of Emergo, Hong Kong, and we always play around with each other. He joins these chats and he always asks the same question: when moon, when moon, when moon. But he's done some great work, and Emergo Hong Kong recently was kind enough to give me one of the first Cardinal Ledger devices, Ledger S, Ledger Nano S. So I do enjoy working with Gareth and talking to him from time to time. Alright, let's try to look at one that's interesting. Homeschool tips. That's a good way to end it. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, my K through 12 education was actually homeschooling. I worked through the summer, so I finished high school early. It is kind of a golden age to homeschool. Unfortunately, many states in the United States are starting to outlaw it or make it more difficult, I guess because they like having a monopoly on indoctrination and creating puppets. The reality is that there's almost unlimited amounts of knowledge that exists online and well curated to sculpt a young mind to be to have critical thinking and to have the ability to navigate the world. At the end of the day, education's moved from learn a collection of facts to learn heuristics and mental models to navigate the world. because we have access to unlimited facts. No matter how bright you are, or how good your memory happens to be, Wikipedia is probably going to beat you, and Google certainly is if they don't. So you need to be able to critically analyze information, and you need to understand the world that came before us. What has made me increasingly astounded throughout the last 10 years of my life is I spent a great deal of time, still do spend a great deal of time, reading biographies. And one of the things about biographies is you start realizing that the world that came before you was in many ways much like the world of today. And you had agendas and dreams and hopes, you had elections, you had drama, you had uncertainty. It's just like, remember a distant football game 30 years ago, 40 years ago, if you happen to have watched it. At that moment, that was the present, and you didn't know who was going to win. And similarly, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, we didn't know where the world was going to go. It was the present. So it's incredibly important to have a longer-term view and understand that your time in the world is finite, and you're part of a much bigger picture than the one that you're born into. And if you have some hindsight and you have the ability to reach into the past for inspiration and wisdom, you're more likely than not going to live a better life and not be doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. As for critical thinking skills, they're super important, especially numeracy, the ability to look at statistics and understand what they really mean, and the ability to analyze arguments, so important because we're bombarded by enormous amounts of fake news, and we're bombarded by enormous amounts of things that are presented as fact that actually are opinion, and in many cases unsound opinions. So it's less meaningful to be able to retain things than it is to be able to critically analyze an argument or a story. For example, when people say, well, vaccines cause autism, let's take that just in itself. How would you go about determining if that claim is true or not? Now, if you're a well-trained mind, you'd say, where's the evidence? And you would look at the evidence, and then you would know the difference between correlation and causation, and you'd also understand things like confounding factors, and you'd look at reputable sources. You'd look at meta-analyses, and you'd go to literature. And what ends up happening is when people don't want to do that, they're much more inclined to say, well, I'm going to have confirmation bias, only pay attention to the things that seem to confirm my particular opinion, and ignore everything else. And if there's evidence to the contrary, I'll discredit the evidence by saying it was produced by biased actors or a conspiracy. This is basically the heart of the Flat Earth movement. And that's where we're at. That's why politics has become so treacherous. And that's why many young people are so frustrated, because they're seeing the world through very dark glasses that are clouding their judgment. So if you're homeschooling your kids, you have a moral obligation to ensure that they leave that process with the ability to critically think. And I would highly recommend that they also read the great books. If you go back to first principles, Mortimer Adler wrote a book called How to Read a Book or something like that. And he curated a collection of hundreds of different books written throughout history by some of the greatest thinkers humanity has known. And, if you go from 14 or so to about 18, it's about enough time to get through all those books if you're working diligently. Just doing that alone with good critical thinking skills will probably produce somebody who's happier, healthier, and feels great. Lifestyle is also really important. Meditation, flotation, therapy, learning about fasting and keto and all these other cool things. Super important to inculcate into your daily routine. I don't do enough of that, but when I do, I feel a lot healthier and happier. I think this whole notion of a work-life balance is underappreciated, and it creates people who are tremendously stressed all the time, overworked all the time, and they somehow think that that's a moral virtue rather than a vice. If you burn yourself to the ground, all you're really doing is hurting the person you will be in the future for some short-term benefit for the person you are today. If you're willing to do that to yourself, you're probably more likely than not willing to do that to other people. And you start losing empathy, and you start treating everything in the world as a transactional affair. So the other homeschooling tip is focus on lifestyle as well. and make sure that your kids don't treat people like objects. Treat them like. Okay. Well, thank you, Ed.